Sister Rebecca, and just come here once again, talk about criminal law. And for this case of today, we're going to talk about criminal liability. And just pray that you pay attention, you read this, and then you automatically gain in it. Today, we're going to talk about criminal liability. What do I mean when I'm talking about criminal liability? Criminal liability is the responsibility of someone to a certain crime or a certain offense. Like, when do we find someone liable to a certain offense or of anything or something? And you're going to be talking about strict liability, vicarious liability. Then it's where we shall even talk about mens rea, we shall talk about actus reus, we shall talk about even what do we call an original act and what do we call the continuous act, right? So this is going to be so yeah. First of all, we're going to talk about strict liability. Strict liability, simply, I mean, like, when somebody carries out, when an offense is committed, a person is strictly is the strict offender. Like, is the person if you carry out a crime, it's you to be blamed, not somebody else. If you rape someone, it's you to be blamed. If you murder somebody, it's you to be blamed. The offense is put onto you, the guilt is put onto you, not somebody else. And if you do anything wrong, it's you to blame, not somebody else. So in this case, we also look at vicarious liability. Vicarious liability is when, if I carry out, if I case of strict liability, if A commits a crime, if A carries out murder, then it's A to blame, not somebody else. Then for strict liability, for vicarious liability, if A commits a crime, then the offense, like the crime, will be shifted to another person. A commits a crime, then the offense is shifted and put onto B. So that's vicarious liability. This vicarious liability is normally seen in cases of, let's say, a child is caught up with gun, and a child who's below 18 years of age. You know, that's what our constitution says. That child who's below 18 years of age is caught with a gun. Then the offense is shifted onto the parent. So that in this case, the parent is another person who didn't actively carry out that crime, but because the person that carried out the crime is a child to that person, then the parent will be liable of the charges of the criminal offenses that would have been for his or her child. That's what you call vicarious liability. And another example is let's take an example. A person went to a bartender sold, let's say, wine to a customer, and it was really effective, and it maybe caused death to that person. And when it comes to suing the courts of law, the case or the offense will be shifted from this seller to the person or the owner of that bar, not this attendant. You get? So that's what we call vicarious liability. And the law, the criminal law says, if you carry out a crime, it's you to blame, not any other person. But in this case, we see that vicarious liability also brings out that view that if somebody carries out a crime, it can be shifted to another person. And in this case, we are going to also talk about mens rea and actus reus. Mens rea section, like, in order to carry a certain crime, they look at different things. A person is not guilty until that person is presumed guilty, is proved guilty, or that person pleads guilty. If a person comes out and confesses that I did this, I murdered, then that's why we can bring a view that that person is guilty of any certain crime. So to judge different crimes or different offenses, they look at different things. We have that I've talked about here, we have mens rea and actus reus. Mens rea is so about the mind, the mindset. What before you doing that thing, what did you have in your mind? Did you intend to do that? Did you have it in your mind before doing that thing? They look at that, they call it evil mind, because you had the mind, you went and stole. But stealing, that anything that you stole, did you have the mind, do you have the intention to steal before? When we are looking at the mind, we see like, how did you plan, how the process before this act or this offense was carried out. We look at what did you do, which people did you associate with, what words were you saying before you coming to steal, and that's why they can judge that you had a mens rea. If you had a mens rea to do something, then it's automatically that you are guilty or you are liable of that offense. That's what you call. I said we look at the mind of a person. We look at what exactly that person had in mind before doing that particular offense. So it's a good thing to know that mens rea also, before a court carries out a judgment, they look at your mens rea, and they can make research about the intentions that you had before you carrying out the crime. They can look at what did you do, because there are different things that can show us that you really had mens rea. You can't tell us that you killed a person. You came and maybe somebody, you came and killed a person, and you cut off the head, you cut off the leg, and then you be like you are defending yourself. We already know that you had mens rea, because you cannot kill that person, you cannot cut the person in different areas, and then you in different parts of the body, and then you claim that you didn't have the mens rea, because you had planned it early alone. You knew that I can do this and this person dies. So mens rea is always a major issue when a judgment of a certain, or when they are looking into a certain offense and they see whether the person is guilty or not. And then another thing I talked about, actus reus. Actus reus, they look at the act. They look at the act majorly. Actus reus, when you carry out an act and maybe you had no intention. Had no intention of killing somebody. For example, you gave somebody a glass of water, but you didn't know that it's a glass of poison. Then that person accidentally dies. So it's actus reus. You didn't have the intention of doing that thing, though that particular act that you did came out in a bad way. The effect of the act that happened was unlawful. So sometimes they look at the mens rea and actus reus. So for any offense to be carried out, all those things are considered, all those things are looked at, and from there the court can give its own view according to different testimony that have been given out. And we are going to talk about the original act. The original act is when, let's say, the original act, we look at what really caused. You might not have been the one that caused the death of somebody, but because of what you did, it might have caused the death of another person. For example, you were smoking, and then from there you just flew out the part of your smoke. Then from there, maybe a certain house was caught up with fire, and maybe a child died. So it's that original act, it's that thing, that smoking of yours, that piece of your smoke that you sprayed away, that led to the burning of the house, that caused the death of the person. So from there, they can look at whether you're criminally liable or not. Then another thing, I can talk about the continuous act. The continuous act. Before talking about the continuous act, I can bring to you the case of Ara versus Mirrors. Ara versus Mirrors is a very good case that talks about the Oligino Act. The Oligino, this case, the defendant was smoking and then just found himself. He fell asleep and then he found himself, like, because of what he was smoking, the house caught fire, and then he never tried to stop the fire. He went to another room. Let alone the whole house was damaged, and then he was charged of arson. And in this case, this is the Oligino Act, because he was smoking. It let alone caused the burning of the whole house. Then the continuous act is when is whereby because you did something, it happens after what you've done. You do something and then let alone it causes it causes a crime. For instance, in the case of Wagon versus the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, in this case, he stabbed on the feet of the policeman, of which after all he didn't have the measure of stepping or injuring the policeman, but because that alone, after realizing that he had caused an injury, before he had no measure of causing injury to this policeman, but let alone after analyzing that he had caused injury on the policeman, he let alone abused him, which was not fair. If you believe that if you cause something harm to a person, you can easily apologize to show that you didn't intend to do that. But he let alone abused him, which let alone brought the other property of measure, the other point of measure. So with that, he was criminally liable. So it's an act. It's a continuous act. What you did after carrying out a crime. What did you know? When you commit an offense, they look at the acts that you do after committing that crime. They can also lead to your what? To your guiltness. They can also contribute to your being criminally liable. So that's what I had for today. Hope you had good time. I pray that we keep in touch always, and then we discuss more and more things. I'm Rebecca Kusasira. All the best.